I woke up, my eyes slowly adjusting to the dimly lit room. The curtains were drawn, and only a sliver of sunlight peeked through. As I reached for the lamp on the nightstand, my hand trembled, a reminder of the arduous battle I'd been fighting against the ruthless illness that had ravaged my body. "Good morning, sweetheart," Graham's voice rang out, dripping with saccharine sweetness. "How are you feeling today?" I turned to see him standing in the doorway, a broad smile plastered across his face. By his side was Elliot, his son from a previous marriage, his expression a mirror of Graham's. "I'm feeling a bit better," I rasped, my throat still raw from the treatments. Graham's smile grew wider, and he exchanged a knowing glance with Elliot. "That's wonderful news, dear," he said, his tone laced with something I couldn't quite place. Elliot stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine. "Yeah, we're both so happy to hear that." He chimed in, his voice lacking the sincerity of his words. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Graham and Elliot had been nothing but attentive during my illness, but there was an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't ignore. As I struggled to sit up, Graham rushed to my side, his hand resting on my arm in a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt oddly possessive. "Once she's gone, all this will be ours." "Elliot," he murmured, his voice low but carrying a weight that hit me like a ton of bricks. My heart dropped, and the room seemed to spin around me. The words echoed in my mind, their implication crystal clear. They were waiting for me to die, their eyes fixed on the prize, my hard-earned wealth and the boutique I had poured my life into. Tears stung my eyes as the crushing realization washed over me. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my heart and soul, was nothing more than a deceitful opportunist, and his own son was complicit in his schemes. In that moment, something shifted within me. The naivety that had once clouded my judgment shattered, and a new resolve took root. I would not be a victim, not in my own life, not in my own home. As Graham and Elliot turned to leave, their backs to me, I vowed silently that I would not go down without a fight. They had underestimated me, and I would make them pay for their betrayal. With a steely determination coursing through my veins, I knew that this was just the beginning. The battle lines had been drawn, and I would stop at nothing to reclaim what was rightfully mine. My dignity, my independence, and the life I had worked so hard to build. I couldn't bring myself to confront Graham and Elliot head-on, not yet. Instead, I decided to bide my time, to gather evidence and build my case against them. As I lay in bed, feigning ignorance, my mind drifted back to the early days of my relationship with Graham. It had all started so innocently, a chance encounter at a charity gala. Graham, a wealthy businessman, had been instantly charmed by my wit and confidence. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and before long we were swept up in a whirlwind romance. "Seraphine," he had whispered, his eyes sparkling with adoration, "you are the most remarkable woman I've ever met." Caught up in the heady rush of new love, I had been blind to the warning signs. Graham's excessive flattery, his constant need for validation, and his tendency to lavish me with extravagant gifts should have raised red flags. But I was too enamored, too eager to believe that I had found the partner I had been searching for all my life. It wasn't until after our wedding that the cracks began to show. Graham's once charming demeanor morphed into something darker, more controlling. He would belittle me in front of his friends, making snide comments about my business acumen or my fashion choices. "A woman like you should be grateful to have a man like me," he would sneer, his words cutting deep. Elliot, who had been a sullen teenager when we first met, quickly fell in line with his father's twisted behavior. The two of them formed an unholy alliance, united in their disdain for me and their insatiable greed. "Why don't you just sell that stupid boutique of yours?" Elliot had once sneered, his lip curled in contempt. "It's not like you're any good at running a business." I should have left then, should have gathered my dignity and walked away from their toxic influence. But I was too proud, too stubborn to admit defeat. As the years passed, Graham's financial troubles mounted, his businesses failing one by one. It was then that his true motivation became clear. He had set his sights on my boutique, the one successful venture I had built from the ground up. "Once you're gone, your precious little shop will be mine," he had hissed, his eyes alight with malice. And now, as I lay in my sickbed, the full extent of their depravity had been revealed. They were willing to let me die, to sacrifice my life for their own selfish gain. But I was no longer the naive woman they thought they could manipulate. The fire of determination burned within me, fueling my resolve to bring them to their knees. As I watched Graham and Elliot leave the room, their shoulders slumped in disappointment at my continued survival, I knew that the time for action was drawing near. They had underestimated me, and they would pay dearly for their mistake. With my newfound determination, I wasted no time in putting my plan into motion. I knew that if I were to take down Graham and Elliot, I needed to be strategic and gather irrefutable evidence of their misdeeds. My first stop was the boutique, the very business they were so eager to get their greedy hands on. As I stepped through the doors, the familiar scent of jasmine and sandalwood enveloped me, offering a sense of comfort and familiarity in the midst of the chaos. "Seraphine!" Leo, my trusted employee, rushed over, his eyes wide with concern. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be resting?" I mustered a reassuring smile, determined not to let my personal turmoil show. "I'm feeling much better, Leo. In fact, I've never been more motivated." His brow furrowed, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "Is everything okay?" For a moment I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. But then I remembered the unwavering loyalty Leo had shown me over the years, and I knew he deserved the truth. "Graham and Elliot," I began, my voice low and steady. "They've been plotting against me, waiting for me to die so they can get their hands on the boutique." Leo's jaw dropped, his expression a mix of shock and outrage. "Those bastards!" he exclaimed, his fists clenching at his sides. How could they do such a thing? I placed a calming hand on his arm, grateful for his unwavering support. "That's why I need your help, Leo. We have to gather evidence of their schemes, anything that can expose their true motives." His eyes hardened with resolve, and he nodded firmly. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you." Over the next few days, Leo and I pored over financial records, invoices and receipts, lavish vacations, expensive cars, and designer watches, all purchased with funds stolen from my hard-earned business. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, a newfound determination took root within me. I would no longer be the victim of Graham's greed and deceit. It was time to take back what was rightfully mine. With Leo by my side, I began to meticulously document every shred of evidence, building an airtight case against Graham and his conniving son. They thought they could rob me of my dignity, my independence, and my livelihood, but they had gravely underestimated my resilience. As I stood in the boutique, surrounded by the very business they had tried to strip from me, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. This was my legacy, my life's work, and I would fight tooth and nail to protect it. This on, and this held all the cards. Armed with the damning evidence Leo and I had uncovered, I knew it was time to take the next step. I needed to secure my assets and ensure that Graham and Elliot couldn't wriggle their way out of the consequences they so richly deserved. That's when I reached out to Marina, my best friend and a formidable lawyer. We had known each other since college, bonding over our shared ambition and determination to succeed in a male-dominated world. "Marina, I need your help," I said, my voice tense as I recounted the sordid details of Graham's betrayal. To her credit, Marina didn't flinch. She simply nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. "Say no more, Sarah. We're going to make sure those bastards pay for what they've done." Over the next few days, Marina and I worked tirelessly, poring over legal documents and financial records. She was a master strategist, finding every loophole and exploiting every weakness in Graham's carefully constructed web of deceit. "We need to revise your will," she said, her fingers tapping purposefully on the desk. "Make sure that not a single cent of your fortune goes to that snake or his weasel of a son." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "Absolutely. They don't deserve a penny of what I've built." As we delved deeper into the legal intricacies, Marina's admiration for my strength grew. "You know, most women in your position would have crumbled," she remarked, her eyes shining with pride. "But not you. You're a fighter, Sarah." Her words buoyed me, reminding me of the steel that coursed through my veins. I was no longer the naive, trusting woman who had fallen for Graham's lies. I was a warrior, a force to be reckoned with. With Marina's guidance, we crafted an airtight strategy. Not only would I be protected from Graham's greed, But we would also set a trap, a carefully laid snare that would ensnare him in his own web of deceit. He won't see it coming, Marina grinned, her eyes glinting with anticipation. And when he does, it'll be too late. As the pieces fell into place, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Graham and Elliot had underestimated me at every turn, and now they would face the full force of my wrath. The day we finalized the legal documents, Marina raised her glass in a toast. To reclaiming what's yours, Sarah. May those snakes get everything they deserve. I clinked my glass against hers, a newfound sense of empowerment coursing through my veins. They won't know what hit them. With Marina by my side, I knew that victory was within reach. Graham and Elliot had made the grave mistake of crossing a woman who was no longer content to play the victim. I was a force to be reckoned with, and they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. As I left Marina's office, my head held high. I couldn't help but smile. The tide had turned, and the predators were about to become the prey. It was time for Graham and Elliot to face the consequences of their actions, and I would savor every moment of their downfall. With the legal groundwork laid and my assets secured, it was time to move to the next phase of my plan, confronting Graham and Elliot head-on. I knew it was a risky move, but the thrill of finally taking control of the situation was too intoxicating to resist. It was a crisp autumn evening when I invited them over for a family dinner, playing the part of the oblivious wife to perfection. As they arrived, Graham's eyes lit up with a mix of greed and surprise. "Seraphine, darling," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Are you sure you're up for hosting dinner? You should be resting." I mustered a weak smile, determined to keep up the charade. "Nonsense, Graham. I'm feeling much better, and I wanted to have a nice family meal." Elliot shot me a skeptical glance. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "If you say so," he muttered, brushing past me into the dining room. As we sat down to eat, the tension in the air was palpable. Graham and Elliot made small talk, their eyes occasionally darting to the silverware and china, no doubt mentally appraising their potential value. Finally, as the main course was cleared away, I decided it was time to strike. "Graham, Elliot," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. "There's something I need to discuss with you both." Graham's brow furrowed, his mask of concern slipping ever so slightly. "Of course, dear. What is it?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I know what you've been up to." The silence that followed was deafening, the air thick with tension. Graham and Elliot exchanged a panicked glance, their faces draining of color. I don't know what you're talking about," Graham stammered, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile playing on my lips. "Oh, I think you do. The embezzlement, the offshore accounts, the fancy cars and vacations, all paid for with money you stole from my business." Elliot's fists clenched, his knuckles turning white. "You have no proof," he spat, his eyes blazing with fury. With a flick of my wrist, I produced a thick stack of documents, the damning evidence Leo and I had gathered. "I think you'll find that I do." Graham's face contorted into a mask of rage, his true colors finally revealed. "You conniving bitch," he snarled, slamming his fist on the table. "You think you can take everything from me?" I met his gaze unflinchingly, my resolve unwavering. "I'm not taking anything from you, Graham. I'm simply reclaiming what's rightfully mine." Elliot leaped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "This isn't over," he growled, his eyes burning with hatred. "We'll make you pay for this." I couldn't help but laugh, a rich, mocking sound that only seemed to infuriate them further. "Oh, my dear boy, it's already over. You just don't know it yet." As they stormed out of the house, hurling insults and threats over their shoulders, I felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through my veins. The game was afoot, and for the first time I held all the cards. Graham and Elliot had underestimated me, thinking I was nothing more than a meek, submissive woman, but they were about to learn a brutal lesson. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I would stop at nothing to reclaim what was mine. The days following my explosive confrontation with Graham and Elliot were a whirlwind of activity. With Marina's guidance, we wasted no time in setting our legal strategy into motion. First, we filed for divorce, citing Graham's embezzlement and financial misdeeds as grounds for the dissolution of our marriage. The paperwork was airtight, backed by the mountain of evidence Leo and I had gathered. He won't know what hit him, Marina grinned as she slid the documents across her desk for my signature. By the time this is over, he'll be lucky to have the clothes on his back. Next, we turned our attention to the criminal charges. Graham's theft from my business, coupled with his blatant fraud and money laundering, was more than enough to ensure he faced serious consequences. As we sat in Marina's office, poring over the legal documents, a loud knock at the door interrupted our work. Marina's assistant poked her head in, her face pale. "Miss Cole, the police are here. They say they need to speak with you and Miss Westbrook immediately." Marina and I exchanged a knowing glance, silently bracing ourselves for the confrontation to come. Sure enough, two stern-faced detectives strode into the office, their eyes fixed on Graham's financials spread across Marina's desk. "Miss Westbrook?" "Mr. Westbrook," the taller detective began, his voice gruff. "We have reason to believe that you've been involved in a massive embezzlement scheme, siphoning funds from your wife's business into offshore accounts." Graham, who had been summoned to Marina's office under the guise of signing divorce papers, blanched visibly. "This is preposterous," he sputtered, his eyes darting wildly between Marina and me. "I would never do such a thing." The detective arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by Graham's bravado. "Is that so? Then perhaps you can explain these financial records?" He slid a stack of documents across the desk, the very evidence Leo and I had painstakingly gathered. Graham's eyes widened as he frantically flipped through the pages, his facade crumbling with each damning entry. This is a mistake," he stammered, his voice quavering. "These records must have been doctored." Marina let out a derisive snort, her eyes narrowed in contempt. "Save it, Graham. The jig is up, and you know it." As the detective slapped handcuffs on Graham's wrists, reading him his rights, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication wash over me. The man who had once held so much power over me, the man who had sought to strip me of everything I held dear, was now being led away in disgrace. But the true triumph came when Elliot burst into the office, his face flushed with fury. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes wild. "Where's my father?" Marina gestured towards the door, a wicked smile playing on her lips. "Your father is being taken into custody, Elliot. It seems his little embezzlement scheme has finally caught up with him." Elliot's jaw dropped, his eyes darting between Graham and the detectives. No, this can't be happening." I couldn't resist twisting the knife, relishing in his anguish. "Oh, but it is, Elliot. Your father's greed has finally come back to bite him, and you're next." As the detectives hauled Graham away, his muffled protests fading into the distance, I turned to face Elliot. The fear in his eyes was palpable, and I reveled in the knowledge that his world was crumbling around him. "You thought you could take everything from me," I said, my voice laced with barely contained triumph. "But in the end, you'll be lucky if you're left with the shirts on your backs." Elliot opened his mouth to protest, but the words died on his lips. He knew the game was up, and there was nothing he could do to stop the wheels of justice from turning. As he slunk out of Marina's office, his shoulders slumped in defeat, I couldn't help but savor the moment. Graham and Elliot had underestimated me at every turn, and now they were paying the ultimate price for their hubris. The battle was won, and I had emerged victorious, a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her dignity in the face of overwhelming odds. The days leading up to Graham's trial were a whirlwind of activity. The media had caught wind of the scandal, and the story of the embezzling husband and his deceitful stepson dominated the headlines. As Marina and I arrived at the courthouse, a throng of reporters swarmed us, cameras flashing and microphones thrust in our faces. "Miss Westbrook, how do you feel knowing your husband betrayed you in such a despicable way? Do you think Graham and Elliot will receive the maximum sentence?" I pushed through the crowd, my jaw set with determination. Marina fought her way to my side, her steely gaze daring the reporters to cross her. "No comment," she barked, her voice cutting through the cacophony of questions. "We'll have our say in the courtroom." As the courtroom doors swung open, I caught my first glimpse of Graham and Elliot since their arrests. They sat at the defense table, their once arrogant demeanors replaced by a sullen, defeated air. Graham's eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had once loved, the charming, charismatic figure who had swept me off my feet. But that illusion was quickly shattered by the cold reality of his betrayal, and I felt nothing but contempt for the man before me. The trial was a brutal affair, with Marina systematically dismantling Graham's flimsy defense. Each witness, each piece of damning evidence, served to further unravel the web of lies he had so carefully constructed. "Mr. Westbrook, you stand accused of embezzling over $2 million from your wife's business," the prosecutor stated, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "How do you plead?" Graham's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room in a desperate bid for escape. "Not guilty," he croaked, the words ringing hollow even to his own ears. As the trial wore on, the weight of the evidence against Graham and Elliot became insurmountable. Bank records, financial statements, even damning testimony from former employees, all of it pointed to their guilt. Elliot, his once youthful arrogance replaced by a pale, haunted expression, took the stand in a last-ditch effort to salvage their crumbling defense. "My father and I were just trying to protect our family's interests," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "We never meant to cause any harm." Marina seized the opportunity, her eyes glinting with triumph. "Is that so, Mr. Westbrook? Then why did you and your father make numerous attempts to conceal the embezzled funds in offshore accounts?" Elliot's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. He was caught, trapped in the inescapable web of his own lies. As the jury filed back into the courtroom, a hush fell over the gallery. The foreman stood, his expression grave, and delivered the verdict we had all been waiting for. On the charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering, we find the defendants, Graham Westbrook and Elliot Westbrook, guilty on all counts. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, but I remained steadfast, my gaze fixed on Graham and Elliot. Their faces were a study in anguish, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. As the judge handed down their sentences, lengthy prison terms and hefty fines, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. These men, who had once held such power over me, were reduced to nothing more than common criminals, their greed and deceit laid bare for all to see. As the bailiffs led them away, Graham turned to me one last time, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. But I had none to give. He had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences. In the aftermath of the trial, I found myself standing in the bustling boutique that had been at the center of this sordid saga. Leo approached me, his eyes shining with admiration. "You did it, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You beat them at their own game." I surveyed the shop, taking in the familiar sights and scents that had once brought me such joy. Now they represented something more, a symbol of my resilience, my refusal to be a victim. "No, Leo," I replied, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "We did it. Together, we reclaimed what was rightfully ours." As I looked toward the future, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But with the strength and determination I had discovered within myself, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, stronger, wiser, and forever unbroken. The months following Graham and Elliot's sentencing were a whirlwind of activity. With the legal battles finally behind me, I was able to turn my attention to rebuilding my life and my business. The first order of business was revitalizing the boutique. I poured every ounce of my energy into breathing new life into the place that had once been the source of so much turmoil. Leo was by my side every step of the way, his unwavering support and loyalty a constant source of strength. Together, we overhauled the decor, updated the merchandise, and implemented new marketing strategies to attract a fresh wave of customers. "This place is going to be better than ever? Sarah?" Leo beamed as we surveyed our handiwork. "Just you wait and see." And he was right. Within a matter of months, the boutique was thriving once again, a testament to the resilience and determination that had carried me through my darkest days. But my journey didn't end there. As I stood amidst the racks of designer clothing and the sparkling displays, I couldn't help but reflect on the countless women who had found themselves in situations similar to mine, trapped in abusive relationships, stripped of their dignity and independence by the very people who were supposed to love and protect them. It was then that the idea took root, a foundation dedicated to empowering and supporting women who who had endured the kind of betrayal and deceit that I had faced. A safe haven where they could rebuild their lives, reclaim their strength, and emerge as the warriors they were always meant to be. With a newfound sense of purpose, I immersed myself in the planning and execution of this ambitious endeavor. I poured my heart and soul into creating a comprehensive support system, complete with legal resources, counseling services, and vocational training programs. The day the Foundation's doors opened, I stood before a crowd of supporters, my heart swelling with pride and determination. Too many women have had their voices silenced, their spirits crushed by those who sought to control and exploit them, I declared, my voice ringing out with conviction. But no more. This foundation is a sanctuary, a place where you can find the strength to reclaim your power and forge a new path, one defined by resilience, courage, and an unwavering belief in yourselves. The cheers and applause that followed were deafening, a resounding affirmation that my mission had struck a chord. Women from all walks of life, united in their shared experiences, embraced me with tears of gratitude and hope shining in their eyes. In the months and years that followed, the Foundation flourished, becoming a beacon of hope and empowerment for countless women who had endured the unimaginable. I poured my heart and soul into mentoring and guiding them, sharing the lessons I had learned through my own ordeal. And as I stood before each graduating class, watching these remarkable women stride across the stage with their heads held high, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of pride and fulfillment. They were the living embodiments of resilience, proof that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit could prevail. As for me, I had embarked on a journey I never could have imagined, one that had taken me from the depths of despair to the heights of personal triumph. The woman I had become was a far cry from the naive, trusting soul who had fallen prey to Graham's machinations. I was a warrior, a survivor, and a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that my work was far from over. There were countless battles yet to be fought, countless lives to be reclaimed from the shadows of oppression and deceit. But I was ready. Armed with the strength and wisdom born of my experiences, I would continue to forge ahead, lighting the way for others to follow. For in the end, that was the true essence of victory, not just reclaiming what was rightfully mine, but empowering others to do the same.
My name is Jenny. I'm 38 years old, and while I used to stay slim without any effort when I was younger, I've noticed a bit of a belly lately. Perhaps this is middle-aged spread. But I suppose it's better than being too skinny like I was in my youth. I keep telling myself this to put off dieting, planning to start next year rather than tomorrow. By next year, I'll probably say, diet? Maybe next year. Now, I'll talk about a time when not only my body but also my mind was finer. Or maybe not. I felt like my heart was covered in thick hair. Well, it's a nostalgic story from those times. I'd love for you to listen. This happened about 10 years ago. My husband Steve's father, my father-in-law, passed away suddenly. That event significantly changed my daily life. It's pitiful to leave my mom alone at home, so I've decided to let her live with us. What? It was our 4th year of marriage. I was speechless at his sudden suggestion. To tell the truth, I don't get along well with my mother-in-law. She adored Steve too much and seemed to have wanted to keep him all to herself without marrying him off. If it couldn't be helped, she would have been okay with him marrying his ex-girlfriend, who she really liked. Well, honestly, that might also be a lie. She probably just said that to spite me. You will never let him marry, will you? Said my father-in-law. I'll end up alone. Steve added, and somehow we got her to agree to our marriage. Then, my mother-in-law proposed living in a duplex house. I was firmly against it, but Steve was like, I'm fine either way. Since then, the clash between my no to duplex and her live in a duplex or give my son back dug a deep rift in our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. My father-in-law used to stop her from going too far, but it seems the balance was lost with his death. Living together. You didn't even discuss this with me. Do I need to discuss having my parents live in a house that's in my name? I was speechless. Maybe he's right. But isn't it strange to decide without discussing it even when we're married? I was both annoyed and confused. However, no matter how many times I asked him to reconsider, Steve repeatedly insisted. It's already decided. Perhaps it would have been better to attach another house next to ours and live as a duplex. If I'm honest, I disliked both options, but at that time, I wished we could have at least discussed it more. Unfortunately, the very next day, my mother-in-law came to our house. When I saw her standing at the front door, the theme from Jaws played in my head, which would be a secret. I thought, oh no, from today on, I really have to live with this woman. Deeply disappointed, I led her to the living room, where she exclaimed, "Wow! The sense of interior is terrible. Why do you have such ugly sofas and cushions?" I braced myself for comments about dirtiness, but the interior design? I'm sorry, Steve chose that. Sorry, Mom. I chose it. Shall we go buy your sofa together? As we said that, my mother-in-law's expression changed completely. Oh, if it's just the sofas, that's a great choice. But the sofas and the cushions don't match, do they? Let's go buy some cushions. She smiled sweetly and intertwined her arm with Steve's like a girlfriend. Seeing this, I got goosebumps on my arms. He also smiled sheepishly and reciprocated. Seriously, no way. Steve has always tended not to argue with his mother. Maybe he's just bad at standing up to his parents. Thanks to her demand for family time. Steve would stay several nights at his parents' house during holidays like Easter and Christmas, while I hardly ever went there except for Christmas. Because of this, I didn't have to watch their interactions for long hours. However, witnessing Steve and mother-in-law like this made me think. Could he be a mama's boy? No, that can't be right. I tried desperately to dismiss my suspicions, but they turned into conviction from the first day of living together. I'm going out to buy cushions with Mom, so you prepare dinner. Mom, what would you like to eat? How about Chinese? Can you make chili shrimp, Jenny? Sure you can, Jenny. I'm counting on you for chili shrimp and other Chinese dishes. With that, the pair left, assigning me the dinner preparation. There was no shrimp in the fridge. I thought, does this mean I also have to go shopping? It's not strange for them to go shopping together, but there's something slightly irritating about it. She didn't move from another state. In fact, her house is just around the corner. She should know the stores around here well enough. Let her buy her own cushions, and you should help with the housework. I had to suppress the urge to punch the wall, and irritated, I went out shopping. After returning from the shopping, I prepared the Chinese cuisine my mother-in-law wanted, waiting for their return. But they didn't come back, even though it was already evening, after having left in the morning. Worried as you would think, I decided to contact him. Hey, where are you? Dinner's ready. What? Dinner, oh, sorry, just eat there. What do you mean? I'm out eating Chinese food with Mom. It's been fun catching up with her, and I completely forgot about dinner at home. Sorry. Steve laughed as if he had made a simple oversight. Hearing his laughter, I felt a boiling frustration. After going out of my way to buy groceries and cook for 3, I thought, if you were going to eat out, I could have just made something simple for myself. Nevertheless, I didn't want to eat with her anyway, so I didn't feel left behind. Anyway, it's only natural to be upset when you are asked by someone to prepare a meal and then get abandoned. This rocky start made me wonder if I could really manage living with my mother-in-law in the future. My anxiety only grew over the following 2 weeks. The relationship with my mother-in-law, which I had hoped might improve, only deteriorated day by day. She would constantly criticize my way of doing housework and my lifestyle. Take a bath before cooking dinner, it's unhygienic. Don't store perishables in their original packaging in the fridge, transfer them to airtight containers to avoid odors. Don't use disposable wipes for cleaning. Just use a rag. While I could almost understand her nitpicking, her next demand was baffling. Don't go to bed before Steve. Wait at least an hour and a half after he does. What kind of rule is that? It seemed like she was taking her son's authority too far. While I wanted to suggest sharing household duties since we were living together, I held back because I wanted to get along with her. I really wanted to improve the tense atmosphere in our home, so I tried my best to follow my mother-in-law's instructions as much as possible. However, my efforts proved futile. For example, one day, she scolded me for keeping perishables in their original packaging in the fridge. I followed her instructions, but the following day she would likely scold me for transferring them into different containers, claiming the containers would now smell. Her instructions change daily, and what she tells me one day often becomes a completely different story the next. This seemed to be her way of harassing her daughter-in-law. It was incredibly petty, and her smirking after criticizing me was infuriating. Enduring such treatment from morning till night, even someone as tough as me reached their mental limit. Living together for just 2 weeks felt like more than 6 months. I tried discussing this with Steve in our bedroom, but he was hardly supportive. Around that time, he had been overly attached to his mother, even meeting her for dates after work. When was the last time he dated me? Thus, my requests for him to mediate between his mother and me were futile. Mom's cooking has always been delicious. If she says to mind the fridge odors, she's right. She's a respectable mother, so you should just listen to her. You're always complaining about Mom. You don't empathize with how she feels living alone with us at all. Mom is always right. Maybe we should have reconsidered this marriage since she was against it. His praises for her mother was just endless. While I was constantly belittled despite doing all the housework, her inconsistent advice, which she proudly upheld, was increasingly validated. Eventually, I realized it was futile to argue and started thinking about how to endure each day without letting them get to me. It was easier to just nod along and ignore them. Just as I thought I had figured out how to cope, another incident occurred. Are we having fritters today? Oh. Why did you include eggplants, which I hate? Are you trying to upset me? Seeing the dinner dishes, she shouted. Sorry, I didn't know. But Steve likes it. I genuinely didn't know it was her disliked food, so I felt truly sorry. However, it seems it was a mistake to say. But Steve likes it. At that time. That's obvious. Do you think I don't know my own son's tastes? She yelled, infuriated. No, that's not what I meant. Please, don't pull on my apron, it's dangerous. As she yanked on my apron and even tried to pull my hair, she screamed. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. You think you can just show up and take over? I am his one and only mother. Just as she pulled my apron sharply, the tie around my waist came undone, and I lost my balance, causing a pot of hot oil to tip over. Oh my gosh. I promptly pushed her away and dodged the oil, preventing a major accident. However, I couldn't avoid burning the tips of my left toes. Fortunately, it was only a minor burn from the oil that had cooled slightly after spilling. Before I could even cool my fingertips, I endured the pain and asked my mother-in-law. Are you okay? She angrily shouted back. That was dangerous. It's all because you were flailing about. I could have been burned because of you. What a frightening daughter-in-law you are. What? You were pulling on my apron. I was just trying to stop you. Didn't I say it was dangerous? Are you talking back now? After putting me in danger and not even apologizing. You really have no manners. I'd like to see who raised you. I swallowed the words I wanted to say back. You saw my parents at the wedding, didn't you? I had pushed her away to prevent her from getting burned, yet I was the one who got injured. And still, why must I be scolded like this? With all due respect, Mother. Just as I was about to retort, Steve came in from the front door. Really, if you're home, open the door. It's awful not to even unlock it when I ring the bell. Before him was the hot pot, the scattered oil, and a little distance away, his wife in disarray and his mother in a fury. Even my foolish husband could see something was terribly wrong. His face had turned pale. "What happened here?" he asked, to which his mother clung to him, crying, "Steve, help me. What's going on, Mom?" Jenny suddenly started raging while she was cooking. I tried to stop her because it was dangerous, and she pushed me. What? I almost got severely burned by the oil. It was terrifying. "I know you might be upset, Jenny, but please, stop bullying an old woman like me." After saying that, the mother-in-law looked at me and smirked. Steve, believing I was at fault without question, glared at me. I had been framed. "You've been acting too high and mighty towards Mom lately." What? I was stunned by his sudden accusation. Far from acting superior, I had mostly been on the receiving end of orders. Most of the time, it was too tiring to argue, so I just agreed with whatever was said. It was absurd for him to say such things based only on what he heard from his mother, especially since he never witnessed how she constantly berated me. "Mom is just trying to teach you how to be a good wife. Just follow her lead." After shouting at me, Steve looked satisfied with himself, and the mother-in-law applauded him. No one bothered to ask if I was hurt. I was furious. Ignoring him and mother-in-law, I cooled my foot. While my temper did not subside and I remained irritated, fortunately, the burn cooled down. Every time they saw me, they accused me of trying to hurt the mother-in-law, calling me a terrible wife. But I ignored all their comments. Let them say what they want. They'll be the ones to regret it in the end. The next day, I called my father and explained everything that had happened. "That house is dangerous, come back home." He said that, but I asked for his help with something. Although he wanted to bring me home immediately, he became enthusiastic about helping once he heard my plan. That same day, my father came to the house where I lived with Steve and mother-in-law. My mom and dad are close to divorcing because they've been arguing, and it's sad to leave him in such a tense home, so I've decided to let my dad live with us from today. When I announced this, both Steve and mother-in-law were confused and started to object. "What? Don't joke, Jenny. You can't just decide that without consulting me. That's too selfish, Jenny." "How dare they say that? That's rich coming from you. You decided to live with your mother without consulting me at all." As I glared at him, Steve retorted, "That's because this house is in my name." "Yes, the house is in your name. But I had forgotten, but I used my savings from before we were married as the down payment for this house. Thinking about it, isn't this marital property?" When Steve suddenly announced he would be living with his mother, I was too embarrassed to argue back then because I didn't know better. However, if a house is in Steve's name and the wife has contributed to the payments, it's considered marital property. Additionally, there was a time when I was paying the living expenses from my part-time job earnings. Therefore, there's no reason for him to do whatever he wants with his house because it's also mine. My comment left Steve speechless. The mother-in-law, flustered, looked back and forth between us. "By the way, Steve, did you wash those clothes yourself?" Caught off guard by my father's sudden comment, Steve looked bewildered. "No. Jenny does the housework." At this, my father raised an eyebrow. "Jenny's job? Don't you help out at all? This is your house, isn't it? Don't you do any housework in your own house?" "Well, the house belongs to Jenny too. You just boasted that it was your house. Can't you take care of your own home? Please stop." Steve is pitiful. As my father and Steve argued, the mother-in-law intervened. My father, knowing the situation from my stories, stared sternly at her. "Oh. And who made that breakfast this morning?" Jenny did." Do you have a problem with that?" "Of course, I do. You just eat the food she makes and wear the clothes she washes." And when I blamed him for that, you say Steve is pitiful? Isn't my daughter the one who's pitiful? Father continued. The only time you can say pitiful is if Steve does more housework than my daughter, and nevertheless I blame him unnecessarily. Are you saying it's pitiful because it's spot on and you want me to stop pointing it out? As my father relentlessly pointed out their faults, both Steve and his mother's faces turned red. Dad, let's leave it at that. You're right, but if you go on, these two might cry from embarrassment. They brought it upon themselves, yet they're so fragile. Laughing, my father's laughter made me chuckle too. What the hell? You're my wife, so of course, you should take care of me. Yes. It's enviable that you get to take care of Steve. I'd switch places with you if I could. Are they out of their minds? Do they even have brains? Steve, what you're describing isn't a wife but a slave, or maybe an unconditional mother who does everything for you. A wife should automatically take care of her husband's personal needs? Then, as a husband, you should also take care of mine. Marriage is about equality. My words made Steve freeze, and the mother-in-law became furious. Jenny. How can you speak to Steve like that? Oh, I'm just teaching Steve how to be a husband. I would like him to follow it properly. Don't you think so? And how exactly have you been speaking to my daughter, madam? My father and I mirrored the accusations they had made. Confronted with their own words, Steve and his mother fell silent. Really? People who can't do anything by themselves shouldn't be giving orders. All you do is tell others what to do without lifting a finger yourselves. Even when the pot tipped over last time. You seem to believe everything your mother says, but remember, I was the one who saved your precious mom. Steve widened his eyes in surprise at my words. That time, your mother was the one who attacked me while I was cooking. She caused the pot to nearly tip over, so I had to push her away to protect her. I ended up getting burned because of it. And yet, neither of you thanked me. Instead, you both blamed me. Ha, I've had enough of this house. My blunt words made Steve raise his voice. Wait, Jenny, what do you mean by enough? His face, which had been red with embarrassment, quickly turned pale. Enough means just that. I'm done with this house, with you, with everything. I'm filing for divorce. The mother-in-law grinned, pleased, while Steve froze. Wait, Jenny. I don't hate you. Maybe I got a bit carried away, it was just youthful folly. I was taking you for granted. Please understand. Youthful folly doesn't turn someone into a mama's boy. No matter what you say now, I dislike having a husband who walks arm in arm with his mother. What? It seemed that Steve had always considered such behavior normal. For the first time, he looked puzzled as if asking. That was the problem? No way we can understand each other in a lifetime. Choosing divorce is the right decision. However, the mother-in-law seemed unhappy with Steve's reaction. Steve. You don't need to hold on to such a woman. I'm here for you. She clung to him as if she were his girlfriend. But he shook her off. It's because Mom clings to me that things have gotten to this point. It's like everyone says I'm a mama's boy. It's your fault, Mom. What's wrong with being a mama's boy? You used to tell me how much you loved me. What are you talking about? I've always felt you were in the way. Please, Jenny, come back. I'll cut ties with her. What do you mean, Steve? Would you choose a woman who wants to abandon you over your own mother who raised you? Quiet. Just shut up, Mom. Traitor Steve. Heartless son. I trusted you. As a fierce argument broke out between mother and son, my father and I watched quietly for a moment, then exchanged a knowing look. Let's go home, Jenny. The atmosphere here is too toxic. Yes. It feels like even my lungs are becoming mama's boy. Thus, my brief marriage came to an end. Later, I mailed the divorce papers and successfully finalized the divorce. There was no compensation, which was fine by me as I was eager to cut ties quickly. Steve remained with his mother after saying he would cut ties, but when he tried to remarry a woman 5 years his junior, problems arose. His mother did not like the girl. Moreover, she tried to sabotage their relationship, leading to Steve finally cutting her off in anger. Later, it turned out that the girl was cheating, so the remarriage was called off, and Steve tried to reconcile with his mother. But this time, her mood did not improve. Having been repeatedly told he valued other women over his mother, she had finally had enough of him. Shocked, Steve fell into a spiral, becoming obsessed with a girl at a nightclub and ending up in debt. It's ironic that he cut ties with his mother and then couldn't handle the shock. Well, that's just like my ex-husband, always only seeing things from his point of view. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my single life without remarrying. The company I joined after the divorce turned out to be a great fit for me since I excel in roles involving interaction with people. Thanks to my achievements there, I've been promoted quickly. Work has become more enjoyable than romance. While it's still hard for women to reach the same status as men, I'm aiming high. Holding one of the highest positions among women, it's not an impossible situation. It might still take some time, but having goals in life makes things interesting. Starting my job has broadened my social network and increased my circle of friends. Recently, I've even made friends at the sports gym I started attending with colleagues, and now we're planning a trip together. By the way, I've started dieting. No one interferes, and though it's not flashy, my days are sparkling with fun. My sister walking with such a shabby husband, she still can't get her life together, as usual. I don't mind what people say about me, but I can't stand them speaking ill of my husband. When my husband and I went out, we accidentally ran into my sister and her husband, who used to be my fiancé. The malicious grin on my sister's face that wouldn't stop made my past traumas flash back. I felt as if I was being blamed, though I had done nothing wrong. I am the middle of 3 sisters, with a beautiful and famous younger sister. Our parents raised my cute sister like a treasure, but always compared her with me and sighed in front of ordinary me. Moreover, my sister stole the fiancé who was about to marry me. But unexpectedly, I met my beloved husband and was blessed with cute children, and I thought I had finally grasped my happiness. Why am I looking down like that time again? You always looked down on me like that, didn't you? Those words slipped out of my mouth after years of not seeing my sister, and she laughed scornfully. Big sister, you were so miserable and pitiful, it was unbearably funny. My hands are trembling. Is this from sadness, or is it from anger? If I were my former self, I would be sucked back into those negative emotions. I decide to break free from the past. I raise my head and look straight at my sister, who was once called a beautiful girl, but now her resemblance has faded. This is a farewell. To the painful past, to the pitiful me, and to the sister in front of me. No more mercy. That's the end of such rude remarks. I am Kate Brown. 45 years old. While raising 2 elementary school-aged children, I work at the same company as my husband, Steve. We have a decent income and lead a satisfying life. If I may talk about myself, my life turned around after I met my husband. Born in the middle of 3 sisters, I was called a bad child by my parents. Especially, I was often compared to my excellent younger sister, and each time, my parents would sigh. Furthermore, my sister had a well-formed face, unbelievable to have come from my father and mother. At that time, she was a famous beauty in the neighborhood, and the parental doting on her was tremendous. My parents always affirmed whatever my sister said and never scolded her. And the sister, raised with money and affection, grew into a very beautiful and smart woman. My sister and I were often compared, especially I, who had worse grades than my sister, received all the scolding from our parents. Why can't you do like your sister? It was painful to be asked something that had no answer. My parents only praised and boasted about my sister. By the time I graduated from high school, my parents had no expectations for me, and I got a job at a small local company. There, I met a man. His name was Jim, an older man working at a client company. It's easy to imagine that I, who had just started working, was smitten by him, who handled his work smartly. Moreover, Jim, who I could only send passionate glances to since I lacked confidence in myself, asked me out. Surprised but overjoyed, before I knew it, I had accepted his proposal. I hadn't had happiness in my life, so God gave me a present. I seriously thought so, but happiness crumbled quickly. It was the day he came to greet my parents. The moment he saw my sister, I understood. He was captivated by my beautiful sister. I immediately noticed his heated gaze at my sister, so I escaped home as soon as the greetings were over. Distressed, I confronted him several times. "You love me, right?" "Of course," he said, trying to calm me down, but I couldn't settle down. The image of my smirking sister stuck in my mind. So, the day before our planned marriage registration, when he called me out, and I saw him holding hands with my sister waiting there, I was stunned but also thought in the corner of my mind, I knew it. I don't remember what the three of us talked about. Maybe the shock was too great, and my brain wasn't working. I only understood that he and my sister were going to get married, and my sister's words. "He is too good for you, big sister." Then, when my sister suddenly announced her marriage, my parents didn't oppose it, rather, they were more delighted than when I announced my marriage. Indeed, my parents only saw my sister. Losing my fiancé and feeling like I had lost my family, I couldn't recover from the sadness and became confined to my room. I was in so much pain I wanted to disappear. But only my kind sister, who had always been kind since childhood, stayed by my side, allowing me to recover little by little. I really can't thank my sister enough. Then, as I was wondering what to do next, my sister suggested I move out, taking this as an opportunity. With no lingering feelings for my parents or my ex-fiancé, I decided to move to a faraway town as my sister suggested. When I submitted my resignation, a boss mentioned that he had a connection in that town and offered to introduce me to a job. It was an offer I couldn't wish for more, as I was looking for a new job at that time. When I went to the introduced workplace, the boss's acquaintance waiting there introduced himself as Steve. He was a seemingly unimpressive man, 6 years older than me. However, one time, when I brought canned tea to tea-loving Steve, his narrow eyes softened further in thanks, and I felt a liking for him. After that, though I thought I had had enough of romance after the incident with my former fiancé, being enveloped in Steve's gentle atmosphere made it natural for us to start dating. The time we spent together was very calm, and just sitting and talking in the room made me feel fulfilled. When the number of years we had been dating was about to hit double digits, Steve proposed to me. Honestly, I was surprised by the proposal because I had somewhat given up on marriage, but there was no reason to refuse. Steve knew about my family situation, so he didn't inform my parents and had a small wedding just for the two of us. The ceremony in a small church surrounded by greenery, blessed by sunlight filtering through trees, was very romantic. Furthermore, I, who was 35 at the time and had given up on having children due to my age, was fortunately blessed with 2 children soon after. A cute girl and a boy. I was moved by the small lives I held in my arms and vowed to love them equally. Raising children was hard, but one day, when the children were at school and we parents had been busy recently, we decided to take a day off. We didn't have anything particular to do, so we decided to go shopping while taking a walk. Walking through the town alongside my husband, who was wearing a well-worn workman's kimono that had completely lost its shape, we were having a trivial conversation when an unfamiliar voice called out. No, it wasn't an unfamiliar voice. Because the voice clearly said, "Big sister?" When I looked in the direction of the voice, there stood my sister, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. It really is Big Sister. It's been years. I'm happy to see you. Why are you here? We moved. Hey, Jim. It's been a while. Were you doing well? Jim, my former fiancé, was standing next to my sister. I was so surprised that my mouth went dry and I couldn't speak properly. Who is this? My sister seemed more interested in my husband standing next to me than in me. She slowly looked my husband up and down from head to toe. Nice to meet you. I'm Steve, her husband. No way. Big sister, you were married. My sister looked surprised for a moment, but soon nodded and said, huh, then. Hey, big sister. We live nearby. Won't you come over? No, but. It's okay, right? Jim. If you say so, I guess it's okay. We'll entertain you, okay? Despite wanting to refuse, my sister forcefully pulled my arm, and I was still unable to articulate my words properly. Thus, my husband and I were dragged to the tallest high-rise apartment building in the area by my assertive sister. Please have a seat. I'll make some tea right now. The apartment my sister brought us to was on the top floor of a high-rise building. It had large windows that offered a panoramic view of the city, filled with a sense of openness. However, the strong perfume smell, the same as my sister's, permeated the room, making it hard to stay long. My sister offered us a glossy leather sofa. Make yourself comfortable, both you and your husband. You've never sat on such a nice sofa before, have you? My sister said this while deliberately looking at my husband. It was a disrespectful gaze, as if she was doing a favor for poor people. Within a minute of entering the room, I wanted to retort, but my husband, sitting down, said, "Thank you. We won't hold back." I looked at my husband's face in disbelief, but he was already sipping the tea that was served. It's delicious. What kind of tea is this? I bought it as a souvenir when I traveled to Europe with my husband recently. It's something you two would never be able to afford in your lifetime, so please enjoy it to the fullest. Thank you for your consideration. We will. Despite feeling like my patience was running thin, my husband, seemingly unfazed, sipped his tea again. I reluctantly followed his lead and drank the tea. Then, suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the sofa where we were sitting. Excuse me. I've received a call from work. I'll step out for a bit. That's fine. My husband spoke briefly on the phone in the hallway and then addressed my sister and her husband. Sorry, but I need to step out for a bit. May I? Oh, is it work-related? We don't mind at all. My husband thanked them and turned to me. I need to look up something at work. I'll be back soon. Our company was close to my sister's apartment, so it wouldn't take long for him to go and come back. I nodded to my husband. Once my husband left the room and I was alone, my sister said. It's impressive how you work with such a salary that can only buy cheap clothes. It was likely a comment about the workman's clothes my husband was wearing, but I completely ignored her. Judging someone's character based on their clothes and slandering them is shallow and intolerable. My sister, either pleased by my silence or becoming more spiteful, rattled on unilaterally about how she had acquired this or that brand bag and had been to various places. Honestly, I had absolutely no interest in brand goods or my sister's travel anecdotes, and I nearly yawned. Your husband seems very kind. After a long boastful monologue, she abruptly changed the subject to my husband, and I responded, albeit puzzled. Thank you. That's unexpected of you to say. Are you planning to steal my partner again? Of course not. His naive-looking ambition and those cheap clothes suit him very well. He's a bit out of my league. I've been feeling sorry about that time. What now? She was probably referring to the time when our engagement was broken. Well, Jim. It's not your fault. I was just more beautiful than my unattractive big sister. That's right. There was nothing wrong with your sister choosing me. It was just that we were sincerely attracted to each other. Yes, nobody was at fault. It was just unavoidable. What is this farce? What am I being made to watch? It's worse than a cheap daytime drama. My sister continued to be in high spirits as I remained silent in astonishment. Also, Jim is going to be appointed president of the company next month. Is that so? Congratulations. Thank you. I appreciate you celebrating like that. I'm going to be the president's wife. Sorry, big sister. If I hadn't married Jim, you would have been the president's wife by now. Don't feel bad, okay? My sister, clearly not feeling bad at all, showed a triumphant smile. I don't think anything of it, so don't worry. Oh, putting on a brave face? I'm not just putting on a brave face. Oh, really? Even with such a difference between us sisters? While I'm becoming a president's wife, you, at your age, are walking around during the weekdays with a husband dressed like that. My sister laughed mockingly. As usual, your life isn't going well, is it? Faced with my sister's blatant disdain, I remembered my childhood memories and somehow felt everything made sense. Thinking back, my sister, who had always appeared well-mannered, had enjoyed seeing my misfortune, but she had never explicitly expressed malice towards me like this. You've always thought of me that way, haven't you? That's right. Miserable, pitiful, and unbearably funny. Miserable. Indeed, the word suited me when I was at home, disparaged by my parents and having lost my lover. The memories of my unhappy childhood were enough to make me bow my head. However, at that moment, the doorbell rang unusually loudly. My sister opened the door, and my husband came in. Sorry to have kept you waiting. Holding a bag that he didn't have when he left, my husband, who had returned from work, sat next to me and glanced at me with concern. That's right, his calm kindness had indeed healed my once wounded heart. Wanting to reassure him that I was okay, I nodded my head once. I was done being silent and looking down. Is the company where your husband is going to be appointed president here? I took documents out of my husband's bag and spread them out on the table. What's this all of a sudden? How do you know about this? And what is this paper? Indeed, it was so. You'd be wise to shut that disrespectful mouth of yours right now. What did you say? My sister, apparently surprised to be contradicted by me, her expression that had been smug and boastful throughout turned bright red in an instant. Who are you talking to like that? That's right, what's with the sudden rudeness? We invited you here thinking you are the wife's sister. I didn't ask for this. After what happened before, do you think I'm happy to be talking with you? Indeed, you were shocked by what happened back then. I'll say it again, it wasn't your fault. It was just that your charm was less than my wife's. Huh? Say it twice? What are you talking about? Oh, it's about the time when your husband wasn't here. Your wife seemed to be very sad that she couldn't marry me, so I was just consoling her. How could I have ever considered marrying such a man? Suddenly, I felt a chill. Oh. That's quite different from what I've heard. My wife told me about a man who had promised to marry her but cheated right before the registration. That's because she wasn't attractive enough, so I told her not to worry about it. The moment Jim said those words, my husband Steve's face took on an unusually stern expression. Please stop insulting my wife. I didn't mean to insult her. I just meant that she suits a plain man like you. That's right, that's right. A big company president like Jim matches someone like me. Speaking of which, congratulations on becoming president. Ah, thank you. If you ever have trouble with money, just let me know. I might consider giving you a little help. Well, it looks like we're going to have a long relationship. My company is going to acquire yours. What? At my husband's remark, my sister and her husband looked absolutely foolish. Their previously babbling mouths were now awkwardly half open, completely motionless. A brief silence ensued. The first to reboot was my prideful sister. What silly things are you saying? You're just jealous of us, making up such vulgar lies. That's right. Stop joking around. My sister and her husband started making a fuss together. Amidst their clamor that threatened to spill the expensive tea on the table, my husband calmly slid his business card in front of them. Let me reintroduce myself. On my husband's business card was the name of a competitor company of Jim's employer, along with the title CEO. CEO, director? Huh? I can't believe someone dressed so cheaply could be a president. As for the clothes, it's a day off today. Moreover, no matter what my position may be, people like you who judge others by their clothes have no right to say anything. What did you say? My husband often wears workman's clothes because they are light and cool. Despite their being worn and shapeless, my sister has imposed a great deal of prejudice on him. It's his freedom to wear whatever he wants when not in a public setting, but she, crazily shouting lies and unable to understand that, looks downright ugly in her rage. Lies. I can't believe it. President? You're a president like me? Oh. Aren't you just scheduled to become a president, not one yet? Shut up. That doesn't matter. What's this about an acquisition? I don't know anything about it. You don't know? That's funny. Then, you're also unaware that your own company has been performing so poorly that it can't recover on its own? Huh? That can't be. I see. It seems we need to reconsider some personnel decisions. Wait. Don't rush the conversation. Actually, I just received a report at the company that the acquisition negotiations are likely to materialize. You might not believe my words, but perhaps you'll believe the people at your own company. You should check with them. What did you say? Whether Jim liked it or not, a soulless electronic tone rang out. It was Jim's smartphone. Hesitant to answer due to the timing, Jim, urged by my husband, cautiously picked up the phone. Jim's face turned increasingly pale, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. Do you believe the acquisition talk now? What are you trying to say? I wonder why your company's performance is so poor. Even if we hadn't seen each other for a while, we are indeed sisters by blood. That's why I understood when my sister averted her eyes when I asked about the poor performance. You took advantage of Jim's lack of knowledge about the company, didn't you? It must have been easy for you. I've thoroughly researched the company we're acquiring, so don't think you can talk your way out of this. My sister must have understood what I was talking about as she, too, turned pale. Looks like it's time to end this tea party. Shall we go home? That's why I advised her to keep her mouth shut. As we left the room, leaving my sister and her husband behind, an ugly scream came from beyond the door. The rant was indiscernible. But by then, I didn't care anymore. The acquisition by my husband's company went smoothly afterward. During the process, my sister was fired from the company for embezzling money. In fact, I work in the department that was advancing the acquisition plan at my husband's company, and during our investigations, I discovered my sister's wrongdoing. She must have been quite confident it wouldn't be discovered, having pocketed a significant amount of money. After the tea party, I reported my sister's embezzlement to Jim, and an enraged Jim confronted her, leading to the discovery of her affair. It seems my sister had been using the embezzled money to have fun with her lover. After a dramatic showdown, my sister and her husband divorced. It's impressive how the same mouth that spun out those melodramatic lies could do such things. By the way, I know what happened to my sister afterward because, after being divorced and kicked out of her home, she came crying back to our parents' house, and my sister told me so. My sister and her husband now hold the real power at home and had thoroughly turned her away. My parents were still alive and argued that it was pitiful for my sister, but when my sister said she would stop supporting them financially if they let my sister stay, they immediately backed down. Despite their previous doting on her compared to us. I didn't care about my parents anymore, but even I was amazed by this. Having lost her job and partner, and left with only debts from the alimony for her affair, my sister couldn't get help from anyone and is now living a meager life while repaying her debts. Actually, I think I might help her if she comes crying to me. After all, thanks to her stealing my fiancé back then, I now have a happy life surrounded by my kind husband and beloved children.
Other people's things are not your own. Such a concept is obviously flawed. It's a simple idea, but for those too foolish to understand, perhaps the only option is to step aside. My name is Mary. I'm outgoing and never shy away from meeting new people. I consider myself active and decisive. In other words, I'm fearless and sometimes act impulsively, which carries the risk of failure or loss. Fortunately, I've never experienced a major failure. On the contrary, this boldness has led me to new encounters and special experiences, often resulting in positive outcomes. When I was young, there was a large cherry tree in my family's yard that bloomed beautifully every year. In September of my first year in elementary school, the cherry tree, having bloomed in spring, now shed its colorful leaves. While I was cleaning up the leaves as instructed by my mom, a girl about my age approached and said, "That's a lot of leaves, can I have some?" I quickly responded, "Sure, but in exchange, let's be friends." That was the start of a great friendship. Her name was Linda, a first grader like me, but in the class next door. From then on, through every class change in high school, Linda and I remained close, even attending the same middle school, high school, and eventually the same college. In middle school, I joined a cooking club called Cooking Act. Linda was surprised I didn't choose a sports club, but at that time, cooking was my trend, inspired by a TV show. I found I quite enjoyed it. Every year, there was a cooking contest involving 4 school districts in the area, a competition of culinary ideas and skills, always a highly anticipated event. In this contest, I met a girl from a neighboring district in the same grade. The contest had 2 parts, a presentation of ideas and a technical segment where the dishes were actually prepared. I was drawn to a girl passionately presenting her idea. I instinctively knew she would become my rival. I took a moment to talk to her. There was no hesitation or shyness despite it being our first meeting. She seemed surprised at first, but we quickly bonded over our similar views on cooking and being in the same grade. That girl, Elizabeth, and I would compete in the contest every year after that. Sometimes I lost, sometimes I won. And in our final year as juniors, we both tied for first place, leaving the judges in a dilemma. Elizabeth and I formed a good relationship that continued over the years. We ended up attending different high schools, but surprisingly enrolled in the same college. In high school, I joined the volleyball team. Linda commented, "That's so you, Mary," seeming satisfied. But am I really that energetic? That year, 20 new members joined the team, and I hit it off with Barbara from the next class. Barbara came from a single-parent household. Her mom had assets, though they weren't struggling financially. But she still felt a bit out of place, as there were no other children from single-parent homes around. However, I never cared about that and couldn't even understand why it would be an issue. I actively reached out to Barbara, and we quickly became close friends, devoting our high school years to volleyball. When we narrowly missed qualifying for a league match, we both cried our eyes out and binged on snacks at my house. Linda joined us, empathizing as if it were her own disappointment. Barbara and I were so touched that the 3 of us ended up crying again, hugging each other. That high school life was truly the epitome of my youth. After graduation, Barbara decided to attend the same college as me. During our college years, Linda, Elizabeth, Barbara, and I decided to participate in volunteer activities. We chose an organization that supported elderly care, helping solitary seniors and those in need of assistance. Elderly care was highlighted as a social issue, but mere attention wouldn't bring change. We wanted to contribute even in a small way to improve the situation. We met Susan, the head of the volunteer organization. Susan was a sincere, straightforward, and intellectual woman deeply committed to addressing this issue. I approached Susan, eager to learn from her. Susan, seeing my fearless nature, took a liking to me, and a relationship was formed. My 3 friends and I learned under Susan's guidance, gaining valuable experience. This made my college life fulfilling. Of course, I also focused on my studies, and my thesis won the Dean's Award. In the latter half of my college years, I began job hunting and secured an offer from a well-known trading company. I believe my fearless personality shone through in the interviews, and my volunteer experience was a strong selling point. I received various advice from Susan, the head of the volunteer organization, which helped me face the interviews confidently. As we graduated from college, my group of 4 best friends each embarked on our paths, but we all shared the lifelong bond of friendship. Although my new job made volunteering difficult, Susan assured me that our meeting was a lifelong treasure. My career started with great momentum. I was assigned to the first sales division, a prestigious department known for generating the highest sales profits among the 4 divisions. I was proactive in my approach, never hesitating even with new acquaintances, much to the slight annoyance of my seniors and supervisors. They taught me various sales techniques, and I managed to secure trust and close contracts with my natural flair. My sales performance skyrocketed, surprising even my boss. Achieving such results in just over a year was unprecedented. I wasn't doing anything special, but it seemed my personality and approach were perfectly suited for sales. Years went by, and I continued to break sales records. Turning 28 that year, I became the youngest department head. I had set records as the youngest in various positions, but being a department head came with unparalleled responsibility. It was a sobering realization. My best friends organized a celebration dinner for my recent promotion. It had been a while since I last saw Linda, Elizabeth, and Barbara, but they all looked well. Susan was also invited but couldn't attend due to a volunteer organization meeting, though she sent a message of congratulations, expressing her regret for missing the celebration while praising my effort. The 3 playfully teased me about my love life, asking, "Aren't you going to find someone special despite your career success?" I joked back, "What about you 3?" But being outnumbered, I was at a disadvantage. The reunion was lively, and as we were leaving the restaurant, I accidentally bumped into a man. I was rushing in. He apologized and helped me up, and as I stood up with his assistance, he looked closely at my face and hesitantly asked, "Are you married by any chance?" Surprised, he recognized my friends and called out their names. The man was William, a classmate from the same university. Although we were all from the same university, my friends and I were in different departments, but we always hung out together. William and I were in the same department and had several classes together during our general education courses, so we were closer than with other male students. Through me, William had become acquainted with the other 3. We were all truly surprised to meet William in such a place. After a brief catch-up, William excused himself as he was keeping someone waiting inside the restaurant. Before leaving, he expressed the wish to talk more and we exchanged contact information. A week later, William reached out. He suggested, since we couldn't talk much last time, how about we have a meal and chat? I proposed inviting the other 3, but he said, "This time I'd like to talk with you, Mary." Without much thought, I agreed to meet William. I had always enjoyed his company during our college days, so I was looking forward to seeing him again. The restaurant he chose was stylish and renowned for its delicious food, with a sophisticated atmosphere and exquisite cuisine. We enjoyed reminiscing about our college days and discussing our lives since graduation, and time flew by quickly. Just as I was about to leave, William stopped me and unexpectedly asked me out. He confessed that he had always been interested in me, and after reuniting and talking again, he realized he couldn't wait for another opportunity. I had a good impression of William, and his proactive approach matched well with my personality, so I accepted his proposal. William worked for a manufacturer handling women's accessories, holding a senior position in the new product development department. I hadn't been very interested in personal accessories, so the knowledge he shared was refreshing and stimulating. Despite our busy schedules, William and I made time for each other and continued dating. A year later, William decided to propose, saying he was ready to take a big gamble. When I laughed at his exaggeration, he said, "I was desperate because if you declined, my life would turn dull and bleak." His words touched my heart deeply, and thus our marriage was decided. My 3 best friends and Susan threw a grand celebration party for us, where I was relentlessly teased and ended up quite inebriated after being urged to drink. Thankfully, the next day was a day off from work. We decided to start our married life in my current condominium. When I was promoted to assistant manager 2 years ago, I moved to a slightly larger 2-bedroom apartment ideal for living alone. I chose this place due to its proximity to my company, but coincidentally, it was also close to William's workplace. Considering the convenience for commuting and the adequate space for both of us, we agreed to begin our married life in this condominium. Another coincidence was that it wasn't far from William's family home. His father, Joseph, had passed away a few years earlier, and William had lived with his mother, Jessica, until our marriage. After becoming a widow, Jessica often visited our new home. Jessica and I shared a fearless character, but unlike me, who adapts my approach based on the situation and others' feelings, Jessica expressed her thoughts and opinions straightforwardly, without much regard for her surroundings. Though sometimes challenging, my relationship with Jessica, who was quite similar to me, wasn't bad. William seemed happy about it too. He apologized for Jessica's frequent visits, accepting them without reprimanding her. It seemed his affection for Jessica had grown, especially after his father's death. I could sense his deep feelings for her in his words. While I believed it's good to cherish one's parents, I couldn't help but worry if he might prioritize his mother over his wife. Jessica didn't seem to mind that I continued working after marriage, probably because William had told her about my significant position and high income. My income is nearly double William's due to the difference in our positions and the scale of our companies. However, William didn't seem to mind this at all. Many men might feel their pride wounded if their wives earn more, but William was different, even appearing pleased about it. However, the reason for his happiness, whether it's pride in his wife's success or simply being pleased about the high income, changes the context subtly. I sincerely hoped it was the former. A year into our marriage, Jessica's visits continued as usual. William suggested she probably comes so often because she's lonely, even hinting at the idea of living with her every time. I firmly told him I'm not interested, but William doesn't hide his dissatisfaction. I had never considered living with Jessica, especially given her recent behavior and words. It was simply unacceptable. First came the incessant prodding about grandchildren since about 6 months into our marriage. The phrase, "no grandchildren yet," has become increasingly frequent. Although William and I had agreed to wait a bit longer for children, Jessica persisted with her grandchild calls every time she visited. Just enduring her presence was hard enough, let alone living with her. Moreover, she began asking for financial assistance, claiming her pension wasn't enough or she needed money for things she wanted to buy or to help with renovations at her home. I suspect this started after I paid for a meal when the three of us went out, which William jokingly praised as befitting a high-income earner. Jessica's eyes seemed to light up when she heard this, or was it just my imagination? Her financial requests became increasingly extravagant. I initially agreed not wanting to worsen our relationship, but this only made things worse. Usually, I would have firmly refused such demand, but considerations for Jessica, my relationship with William, and his feelings restrained me. Jessica, on the other hand, made her demands without any such considerations. When I consulted William, he was of no help, suggesting that I, earning for Mom, could afford to give a little. Lately, William had been using his salary solely for himself, while our living expenses came from my income. After repeatedly confronting William about the living expenses and Jessica's demands, he began avoiding me, coming home late and going out on his own during weekends. I felt completely isolated. One evening, while William and I were spending a quiet night at home, Jessica suddenly visited. It wasn't unusual for her to come unannounced, but she had never come at such a late hour before. William, as if expecting her, immediately welcomed her inside. It seemed he knew about her visit. William and Jessica sat down in front of me, and William began speaking. We've talked about this before, but Mom is lonely living alone. I'm worried about her, so I've decided that the three of us should live together. I was about to object, as I had many times before, when Jessica interjected. For that, we need a bigger house, so we've decided to build a new one on this land. We'll start demolishing the current house next week and then build a new one. And until the new house is ready, Mom will stay with us. I was shocked at such sudden news and couldn't simply agree. You can build a house if you like, but I refuse to live with her, even temporarily. Please rent another place for her. It's not just your decision, Mary, it involves you too, Jessica added. After all, you will be paying for the new house's loan with your high income. It should be easy for you. I was dumbfounded by Jessica's absurd claim. Why should I pay for such a loan? As I wondered about her lack of common sense, William said, "That's right. With Mary's salary, it'll be easy. Please do it for Mom." I realized there was another person lacking common sense. I raised my voice. "That's absurd. I absolutely refuse." They accused me of being cold and stingy. William even went as far as to say, "If you don't agree, I don't need you. Let's get divorced," and thrust out a filled-out divorce application at me. "Since you earn but you don't support us if you don't like it, it's divorce. Or you okay with that?" he threatened. They left, telling me to cool off and think it over. William stayed at his mother's house that night. I was determined not to accept their demands, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find a way to make William and Jessica see reason. The next week, Jessica moved into our house as the demolition of her old house began. William greeted her with a big smile, pleased with the progress of their plan. Then, hearing Jessica demanding, "The first loan payment is due soon, so transfer the money quickly," made me realize they were serious. I couldn't let things continue this way, being manipulated by the two of them. I turned to my 3 best friends for support, the only ones I could rely on. They were outraged upon hearing my story. They expressed disgust at William being a mama's boy lacking common sense. Linda reached out that day to join us, and even Susan shook her head and sighed in disbelief. They all promised to support my decision, which was to sever ties with those two. I arranged with the condominium management company to immediately terminate the lease and issue eviction notices to William and Jessica. I submitted the divorce papers William had given me to the authorities, dissolving my marriage with him. I had already been suspecting William's behavior and had hired a detective agency to investigate. They found that William was involved in a suspicious relationship with a junior at his company. I sent William a notice of divorce and a demand for compensation due to his infidelity. Elizabeth, who had studied law in college and was now a practicing lawyer, advised and helped me with these matters. After canceling my condominium lease and losing my place to live, Barbara helped me find temporary housing. She serves as the vice president of a real estate company. She married the company's president, but it was her excellence in sales, consistently topping performance charts, that caught the eye of the former president, now the chairman, and led to her marriage with his son, the current president. This also resulted in her appointment as vice president. With a stable place to live, I decided to fight relentlessly against William and Jessica, who kept demanding loan payments and complaining about the divorce. They moved into a cheap apartment after being evicted and soon faced financial strain, missing several loan payments and foolishly suing me. Elizabeth, representing me, decisively defeated their absurd lawsuit. Burdened with compensation for the divorce and lawsuit expenses, and continuing to default on the loan, they were in a desperate situation. But our retaliation didn't stop there. The final strike was delivered by Linda. After graduation, she blossomed her talent in designing women's accessories, a hobby of hers. She is now a well-known designer recognized by those in the know. William's company, which dealt with women's accessories, had a contract with Linda and a deep relationship. Linda shared the details of William and Jessica's misconduct with the company's president, who was closely associated with her. The president and executive director, whose daughter was William's affair partner, were very close, and William's actions greatly angered them. He was sidelined at work and eventually resigned due to unbearable isolation. Now jobless, William faced the consequences of his actions. Time passed, and a lot happened over this year. William and Jessica repeatedly defaulted on their loan, leading to a foreclosure by the loan company. They never lived in the new house they had built and ended up losing it, with debt remaining as the sale didn't cover everything. The unemployed pair, burdened with debt, faced a bleak future, but I didn't want to imagine just how miserable it was. According to Susan from the volunteer organization, an elderly woman recently sought help, almost penniless, and it seemed to be Jessica. William, jobless and drowning in debt, apparently abandoned Jessica and fled. Susan remarked, "We'll extend help as it's our duty, but I doubt she'll ever escape her dire situation." Thanks to Barbara, I signed a lease for a permanent residence and threw myself into my work, making up for the recent distractions. My efforts paid off, And there's talk among the company's upper management of possibly promoting me to department head, which would set another record for youngest appointee. Though it's not confirmed yet, more than anything, I'm happy to work without any hindrances. I cannot thank Linda, Elizabeth, and Barbara enough. Susan also supported me emotionally. Having such dear friends and mentors is the greatest treasure of my life.